Hey everyone, you're watching DeFi Talks with DeFi Dad. Hey everyone, thanks for joining us. It is Tuesday, April 12th, 2022. I'm joined here today by a partner and COO at LongHash Ventures, Shi Khai. LongHash Ventures is I would summarize it as it's a Web3 venture fund, and they also have an accelerator as part of the fund. And so LongHash has really been one of the longest term investors in the crypto space. And it's been a team that I've actually followed long before this interview. So yeah, just a total pleasure and honor to get to talk with you, Shi Khai. How are you doing? Thanks for joining me.
Great, thank you very much. And indeed, have been following your content for some time as well, Dad.
Yes, yeah, there you go.
and indeed, has been super helpful and very glad to be contributing to the Web3 space throughout this time. And I must say, such an exciting period, and also to be here sharing with all of you.
Absolutely, yeah. And I guess what spawned this conversation is recently we finally got to meet and just kind of talk about the market and what we were seeing, and all the teams that we're excited to work with as builders. But Shi Khai actually wrote a post recently about the title of it is 3 Frontiers of Web3 in 2022. So actually, I'll just really quickly flash this on screen. Here we go. And so we're going to talk. Here we go. We're going to talk a bit about this today, but then more generally about Shi Khai's thoughts on, what is next for NFTs. Like, we've lived through this really exciting period over the last few years where DeFi grew from, less than, I think, 50 million in early 2019 total value locked to now it's like 200 billion on any given day. And then what followed that was this explosion of NFTs. And I would say that NFTs clearly have gone mainstream. I mean, we see it, we see it being referenced in pop culture. We see it being talked about by, big name brands across the world, like an Adidas. And of course, all sorts of celebrities that have chosen to buy NFTs and join different NFT communities. But what caught my attention with what Shi Khai wrote here is just that he's thinking more about how do we make NFTs more useful, and like how is that ultimately going to drive growth? How does that fit into the progress that we've already made in terms of all the crypto applications that have exploded over the last few years? So why don't we start though with Shi Khai, can we talk a little bit about your background? Like, how did you get into crypto in the first place? And then I'd love to kind of hear the origin story of starting up LongHash.
Sure thing. Well, I try to tell it a bit differently every time I tell the story. So let me try a fresh take this time. So all my life, I think I've been looking for ways to have the biggest impact that I can have. Personally speaking, it's more of a personal philosophy to maximize potential, so to speak, and maximize positive impact. So I tried that with various ways, right? Going down a slightly religious path when I was in my teens, going off to the mountains as a monk for a while, to like coming back and say, you know what, let's go down the biological path. So I actually took up biology as my area of study, and went into cancer and stem cell research. Got published once. But found that it was a bit too slow, and then went into business through consulting. So I joined McKinsey for a couple of years and did a lot of strategy consulting. I thought, okay, through the largest institutions, organizations, and sometimes even governments, and forming the strategy for those could be the most impactful way to spend my time. Ended up actually looking at digital banks, because that was what was not only hot, but actually somewhat useful, right? Say in Vietnam, where we launched a couple of these digital banks to actually deliver the products to the underbanked to leapfrog the existing infrastructure. So I was looking a lot of the tech stack back then. And of course, came across blockchain as one of the solutions. And like it just seemed like it just clicked like, hey, banks should be blockchains. Like the core banking system is a blockchain, and all the other stuff is built on top of it or connects to it. But of course, the banks were not ready. At the same time, the whole ICO craze was ongoing, and maybe that validated at least the crowdfunding part of blockchains and crypto. So I went in head first and found that actually, but what actually attracted me to stay and jump in full time is the philosophy and the movement around self-sovereignty, the whole user-owned internet, building immutable public goods that can persist for many lifetimes for everybody to benefit from and contribute to. I thought these ideas were profoundly moving to me. And back then, of course, with the whole ICOs, a lot of people were building infrastructure, but even then, like the message was the same, where we need applications, we need useful use cases for these blockchains. And that's why we need things like an accelerator. So Emma approached me actually because we met at McKinsey and said that, hey, let's do this accelerator, because we already talked about Web3 and crypto back then. And she's like, actually, you know what? Let's do it. Let's run an accelerator and actually support new projects, build new ecosystems. And so that was in 2017-ish, 2018. And I jumped right into it, and there we were.
That was quite a time to jump in. That's when I started working full time as well. And I joked around with friends who weren't working in crypto. If you looked at a chart from the time I joined, the price literally was like down and to the right. It was just, it was hilarious. They used to be like, look, here's the date you joined. It was actually July 11th. I still remember it because I would always mark it and track the price going downwards through the rest of 2018. But cool. So you get started then in 2018. And what are some of the lessons you took from that time that, you know, maybe we'll be reapplying during, I hate to say the B word, if this is a bear market, during this bear market, or whatever market we're in?
Yeah, for sure. Honestly, I think ironically, and a lot of founders and will say this as well, or maybe some investors will say that, hey, the bear market was a great time because that's when, you know, there was no pressure of financials and you could see people just like trying whatever out when there's nothing left to lose. And you just let's try whatever works, and let's try whatever can bring in new people and bring in revenue and bring in capital. So I liked that time of experimentation. And it also flashed out a lot of the players actually back then. So when in 2018, when we first started, a lot of funds came up, there were like 10 accelerators in Singapore, I swear. Like everybody had their own incubator and accelerator, and we were one of many. To be fair, we were somewhat differentiated because we were supported by the government. So that helped us with some legitimacy. But you could see like the moment the bear market came, like these guys left. And it's the same with founders and funds as well. You could really see like who stuck through, even though they had to tighten their belts and cut staff, cut their spending, change their plans, pivot the business model, or build some products first, do some side hustle. But these guys stuck through, and largely because the mission of what they're building or the potential of it appealed so much that there was such high conviction for them to start. And over time, we realized that actually the people who stuck through this period, many of them ended up figuring something out, right? Over time. So of course, like we know the whole MakerDAO, Synthetics. Many of these teams actually started or had some early roots in that time,
right?
And eventually, So I would say the lessons there is even in good times, right? It's not to forget what are the roots and what truly keeps you here. Like, why are you here? Like, what makes you stay? What makes the team come together, and what keeps them together? I think these are the questions that got answered.
What sort of fundamentals then are you seeking in investing in new teams in 2022?
Right. I would say actually the fundamentals haven't changed. Well, I like to say that the first thing we always look for are people who are Web3 native. And that then trickles down to the entire concept, the mission, the product, the partners, the community that you build, the team that you assemble, and and eventually potentially decentralize as well. So the idea of being Web3 native is that we've built from the ground up to be fully seamless in terms of integration with Web3. There were a lot of teams back in 2018, 2019 that were experimenting, and we were also helping to experiment with that. We're like, hey, maybe let me do this private chain thing. Let me do a corporate B2B service, or let me try to be like a governmental thing, or maybe I don't need a chain. Let's just use some sort of like signing mechanism. And inevitably, those have stalled in their progress, simply because it's much harder to firstly change the incumbents, and secondly, you're not tapping into this exponential growth that we are currently experiencing in this like native crypto economy, right? Be it in terms of like different layer ones, the middleware, the applications built on top. Like the more it's built, the more network effects there are. So that's like the number one thing we look out for. And then there's all the other usual metrics of team and different reputational checks. But one thing we do test for also is the fit with our thesis. And so I think that leads very nicely to what we're about to discuss.
Absolutely. Yeah. And I'll let you sort of lead into that. I'd love to kind of like dive into these. Like part of the reason I wanted to talk with you is, we're not in a market anymore where it's like number up only every single day. And that is, while it's a great feeling to, of course, be invested in crypto and watch numbers go up. What we're living through now is a very normal part of the bullish bearish types of cycles. But I think what's important is, are we continually creating more utility and more value for more people to be able to benefit from? And of course, like when you zoom out from where we are today, I mean, it's just mind-blowing, like that even on a bad day, we're sitting around 200 billion in terms of economic activity that is happening across multiple chains too, not just Ethereum anymore, but multiple chains are flourishing, creating new cryptographic powered finance applications. So it feels a lot like I was very young when like email was really becoming more mainstream, but it reminds me in a way of that, like where you're looking at snail mail, being our old finance system. And now you have this new finance system powered by crypto assets, and then all the other applications that are benefiting from NFTs and digitally native assets. But it's faster, it's accessible globally from, any part of the world. It's permissionless so that we don't have to give up all of the same personal identifying data, like our names and emails and phone numbers. And so it's progress to appreciate. But what got me through the last bear market, if we're in a bear market, I hope we're not in a bear market, we'll see. What got me through it though was what got me through was focusing on the transformation that this technology brings, and how can I help to propel that forwards, whether it's building, investing, educating. There's just so much opportunity there. And so anyways, you've written a lot about like these new frontiers in Web3 for 2022. So yeah, if you could dive into some of the theses that you've come up with there, and I'd love to learn from it.
Yeah, for sure. So I hope it's more of a conversation and the sharing, right?
Absolutely. Yeah.
And it could be helpful to start off with some context setting, as you would like to put it, right? You talked about the market cycles. The other frame to look at it was also, even actually through all these cycles, the building never stopped, right? We had this period where the layer ones had to be built, and everybody promised to build all these layer ones through the ICOs. And now we're at the point where like actually quite a few players have built it, and they are working. People are building on these chains, and the chains are stable, or more or less stable enough and scalable enough to do the things they want to do. And then we also had a DeFi, right? As you put it, that has already proven itself to have these benefits that you have mentioned, right? faster, easier, more transparent, real time, inclusive for everybody contribute to. And so it's kind of like, okay, great. We have the existence of the universe, the block space that we can build on, and we have the financial rails, like we have the financial markets that are here to power the engine of an economy. Then the question is kind of like, okay, but what economy do we power? Right? What kind of assets do we have? Do we have businesses? Do we have goods, products, services? And I think arguably not really. We're quite early in this, right? I think what we have are a lot of tokens and increasingly some NFTs. But these tokens more or less represent ownership. They kind of are equity-like in these various protocols, and they don't necessarily represent like a good that I would like to have, or like maybe they could be used to gate certain experiences, like entry into a community. But those are the examples of those are far and few in between. So I think we're at a point where like, hey, look, we have the infrastructure more or less ready. We have the financial engine that's ready to propel growth. Now, all that's left to do to just click it into place is to have something real. And in fact, this has been the longest criticism that everybody's been saying, like, oh, blockchains are useless. Like, what are the use cases? It's for speculation. And fair enough, a lot of it has been speculation, but arguably a lot of it needed to be speculation because it was a circular economy, right? Like you issue out ethers or bitcoins so for people to secure the chain, and like the value of it comes only when there's stuff built on top. Or similarly with like DeFi, right? Like because there isn't an actual commodity to be traded on like a Uniswap, and therefore it feels like, oh, we're just swapping altcoins, shitcoins here and there. Right? The impression can be like that. Right. So I think we're at a tipping point where now we are ready. We are ready to change that impression. And the few factors that are coming in are exactly like what I've been writing about. So talking about NFTs, talking about metaverses, and we talk about DAOs. So NFTs can represent the digital goods, the assets that we have in this economy. Or it can represent certain rights that you have to then participate. Like it's a gateway to certain experiences that is in the Web3 native formats. And then where do you go for these experiences or to use these goods and services? You don't want to go back to a Web2 platform, or rather you don't want that to be the only option, because then you're again bound by the whole problems of Web2, right? The censorship and the instability and so on. You want that to be a Web3 native universe where you can consume these goods and services or experiences, and that's what the metaverse is, right? It's an environment where you can actually live in and hang out and do business and socialize, and those experiences and rights are encoded in NFTs. Then you start to think about, okay, like once I'm in the metaverse, then what kind of organizations do I start to have, right? These social ties that I have, these like working groups that I have, then we start to look into actually those are DAOs, right? Ways for people to come together by having those signatures on chain, be it in terms of NFT membership or like a shared bank account with a multi-sig. So all these pieces are coming together to form this like digital native or Web3 native economy that is built on chain, and you can be amplified further with like all of the DeFi infrastructure. Now, I know these might sound fairly obvious areas, because everybody, of course, NFTs, of course, gaming, of course, DAOs. So now I'd love to go into some specific areas and that we have written about. But before that, any thoughts or comments?
Oh yeah, no, just all I'd add to that is, I think drawing a parallel again to the birth of like the mainstream internet. When you think back to businesses that existed in like the late 90s or early 2000s, to have a website was it was a very like small part of a lot of businesses. It was an alternative sort of storefront. But the bulk of their business, like if you think about traditional like department stores, like a Macy's or just any like Saks Fifth Avenue, these Nordstroms, these are stores that really just created a website to create a property online because there was this new thing that everyone was talking about and using, but it wasn't really driving the kind of traffic that they could have ever like envisioned would come years later. And I think similarly, now with what we're building with Web3, we're talking about that next sort of transition to a virtual world, an AR-based world, however you're going to experience it. It's about being able to access the same resources, to be able to, if let's assume everyone in the future has some sort of VR headset, that they become very, very affordable, the way that smartphones have become more affordable over time. Now everyone has an access entry point, and assuming that they have internet, which that access will continue to grow. And now you're not just talking about creating like a website, you're talking about being able to interact with digitally native communities. And those communities, I think some of the parallels you've drawn out are DAOs to me are really like digitally native businesses. It allows you to collaborate with others, but you share like a treasury. And so, in some cases you invest the money, in other cases, maybe you share those resources to pay the people that work for you. But this is a whole new wealth creation event. I have no doubt that there will be a top, sort of like university that is born in a digital world, like that. It could be, we could have some translation from the legacy players, like let's say like a Stanford or Harvard launches a VR based university. But I have no doubt that in the future, there will be educational programs which will have credentials that, will allow you to get, new jobs, new opportunities in what we're calling the metaverse. And so one big part of that you've touched upon is, if we have money as one construct and all sorts of different parallels to finance that are powered by DeFi or DeFi applications and protocols, one of the things that's missing is just the basics of owning something, digital stuff. If I look around the office I'm in, I've got photos, I've got a printer, I've got a hat here, stuff that makes this office personal to me, and stuff that I've accrued over time for whatever reason. Same thing's going to happen in a virtual based world. And so I guess like I'm sort of painting a picture of like what you'd see in like, like a Ready Player One. I do believe that is a future that actually offers a better life for so many. Not everyone is fortunate to be born in a part of the world where they're not fighting a war, where they're not experiencing some sort of tragedy or atrocities. And I think that the internet has obviously given many opportunities to be able to, buy and sell goods and create businesses and services. This is just one more step beyond that, except it's radical to us because not everyone has a VR headset and has experience and realize that when you go into a VR headset, when you go into, what are like gated metaverses right now, and we're all for this more open source metaverse, that future is going to have all the same constructs of what we love in the physical world, where we have strong relationships with others. We prefer to live in that virtual world. And that virtual world, what I'm calling a virtual world, will really just be the same world to anyone. You wake up, maybe you throw on a VR headset, you teach a class, you work in an agency that's, working with multiple people across the world with your headsets on. Or glasses, I keep saying headset because that's what we have today. So anyways, this all goes back to, these are early primitives that are being built now that I think really power this very exciting world that we're going to live in, and hopefully create more opportunity for that many more people, just like the internet did, but like on steroids. Wealth creation event, like 1000x of what we've seen previously.
Oh yeah. So. Absolutely. Yeah. And I love that we're starting to go towards like this like wealth creation and new assets, new economies, new experiences that are hopefully more inclusive, because what I don't think is going to happen. There was this period in the time of, I think, like 2019 or so, or 20, yeah, there was like STOs. I'm not sure whether you remember, right? Like existing securities, existing real estate, like real world assets, and then putting them on chain. And there have been many experiments over time, but they all have always been very difficult. And they have been not as inclusive, partly because you're relying or you're mirroring a lot of the existing power structures and value structures of the real world, right? Whereas when we're coming to a new economy and the digital economy, there's a chance to recreate what it could look like and what is valued and new commodities. And this is where some of the ideas in the piece, and one particular one I like to highlight, is the proof of contribution infrastructure for DAOs comes in. Of all the ones, I think this is currently my pet topic. And when we talk about inclusive, one of the main criticisms that we have heard of Web3 is that, hey, you're replicating some sort of like plutocracy, or you're making it like a hyper capitalist environment where, like, if I have capital or I have money, I can come in and buy up people's like goods and rights, right? Or I can control this new system when it's early and easy to be manipulated, which to a certain extent, it is true. But it is only true because we have allowed it to be so. This was very obvious back in the ICO days, where like you sold more than 50% of your protocol to people who did no work and only provided capital. Right, and it's becoming less so, where like, okay, maybe I only sell a small portion of it for capital, but the vast majority of it should be earned through things like liquidity mining, and in a way that at least is some work, but still relies on capital, or like playing a game, or actually newer things like move to earn, or like right to earn, perhaps, where like you're actually contributing something useful. So I think this is an area we need a lot more of, and there's so much more potential, so many more ideas that could be born in this world, where to make real DAOs. I think DAOs today, where there's no A in it, there's no autonomous part, because as long as there are humans involved, and you need to have some sort of governance and some sort of decision making, it becomes an organization rather than an autonomous organization. Whereas you could argue that something like a Bitcoin is an autonomous organization where people come together and run these nodes and mine, and then you can build stuff on top of it. So we need more of this kind of autonomous protocol, so to speak, that create new primitives, be it like to capture certain useful commodities. So examples that we have talked about, like if somehow we can tokenize time, somehow we tokenize knowledge, attention, and or potentially even somehow some real world stuff where things like carbon, I don't know whether that's possible or not. If things that are easy for anybody around the world to contribute in a seamless way. And this will then open up avenues or channels for people who don't yet have capital to earn it by participating in DAOs, right? Be in a standardized way. Yeah.
Shi Khai, I have a quick question. So I spoke the other day, I had the chance to talk with a journalist from like a more like major legacy media company. And she was doing some research on DeFi, Web3, and so on. And, I think as anyone who's new, she had some healthy skepticism about like, is everything that's being built really being built for the mainstream, or is it being built for a very few? And one of the criticisms she had, which I think we hear often, is it feels like you guys as in like everyone within like the Web3 community, you're building this hyper financialized world. You guys want to speculate and financialize everything. And I didn't say this at the time, but it definitely struck me afterwards, and it kind of plays into what we're talking about now. The world we live in already is hyper financialized. It's just that in many ways, in many cases, we're sort of blind to it. And so obviously, like this community building these new primitives, like we're talking and discussing this and trying to educate others on like what we're building and why. But I think, this, like with NFTs, for example, I don't feel like NFTs hyper financialize anything. I think it's just we've given digital scarcity to something. And in some cases, it does lead to, bubbles where people are buying for these exorbitant prices. But again, if you look at the economy that's been built with DeFi and NFTs and Web3, I mean, it just pales in comparison to the size of like the global financial markets, the legacy markets. So it's funny because like part of your thesis that I really dug into is just going back to the basics of how do you make NFTs more useful. And there's a number of use cases I'd love you to kind of like talk through more on that. But my argument to friends has been that like it's already gone fairly mainstream. I mean, you've got pro athletes like Steph Curry, who I think Steph Curry owns not only a Bored Ape, he owns like a Linkstyle NFT because he's into golf. And this is happening because it's exciting. I mean, people see communities forming of like-minded individuals, people who are so like-minded, they're willing to put, money into the game. And what drives that? Sure, there's always an element of greed that drives it. But I think some fail to miss the fact that NFTs and tokens, other types of tokens, they allow you to align your interests that much further than what you would do if you just had a regular old meetup. When you put money behind it and you have a treasury that you have voting rights to, it allows you to do more radical things like try to buy a copy of the US Constitution or try to buy a golf course through Linkstyle. So, but what other use cases really excite you as you think about like making NFTs more useful in 2022?
Yeah, absolutely. So I kind of criticize the PFP movement in a way. Not to say that it hasn't been valuable.
Yeah.
I do think that sure it forms communities, but a lot of the value lies in the promise of what these PFPs are going to then deliver, right? Because it's not yet there. Like, oh, we're gonna have movies, we're gonna be a brand, we're gonna have merch, we're gonna have comics, we're gonna people are gonna like use this IP in so many inventive ways. But we have not seen that yet, and the market's pricing that in. So I do see that as a risk, both to the holders and also to the perception of the industry, where like, hey, look, here's another speculative game where like which PFP NFT is going to be has the biggest potential and therefore price the highest, and then maybe they exit. Some people are left holding the bags, and then is there going to be people who built the real work of like giving these communities or NFTs value? So what is value then? And how do we go about building it? And so I thought about it in just two main ways. So you can either you can roughly think of it as like tangible and intangible value, or like fundamental value and utility value. So tangible or more fundamental value is when the NFTs themselves already represent something of value that took effort to create. So here we're talking about things like rich media. So one, I think, rising trend is music NFTs, because to the very act of creating this piece of music already implies a certain amount of effort that has gone in, right? A certain care to put all this together, like to ideate it, record it, and then upload it. And so if you own a collectible of a music NFT, arguably, it has more fundamental value. It already delivers to you a certain experience. And sure, like other people can listen to it too, but I liken it to kind of a public good with private ownership, if that's an ironic way to think about it, like a public piece of art that everybody can see in a park, but you have your name engraved on it, and that has certain social value attached to the fundamental value of the art.
Right.
And then the other bit is then the intangible value, or we can call it like utility value. So here it might be the gateway for you to then access different experiences. So here I think most of the PFA communities already have that, which is you have a gated Discord or the gated Telegram. Some of them then have like these alpha chats, or allow you to be whitelisted for future drops of new artists and so on. And I guess like over time this will also prove itself. It will be even more powerful, like the better and richer experiences start to form, right? When we have like events that are in the metaverse that like we really like to go to, or rich experiences that take time to create in the metaverse, be it from an auditory, visual, all of the ways that we love to experience it. So And it doesn't have to be one or the other, right? You could have an NFT that gives you both,
Right.
arguably, right? It has itself like if I own this music NFT, it gives me access to this club, allows me to meet this artist, so on. So these are all ways that NFTs can become actually useful. And now the bar is so low. The moment you have any utility, people are like shouting, "Hey, look, we have so much utility!" And I'm like, guys, we have to really raise the bar here in terms of like, well, both creating and demanding that our NFTs to be much more useful and be much more sensitive to that, because you want it not to be a financial product, you want it to be an asset, or a gateway,
Yeah.
to digital experiences and goods.
Yeah. I just took our kids to Disney World, and when we were in Disney World, it's funny. I actually had like a lot of. I felt like over the course of 6 or 7 days, I was like continually inspired by a few ideas there of like how we need to go about growing like the crypto space, and like just lessons to learn from our time there. But one of the things that really stuck out is there are just an endless amount of collectibles there. And so when you look at the NFT space, and like I've also been somewhat critical of PFPs, like I think they're cool, but I just like my mind explodes when I look at the price of some of them. And I'm thrilled for the Bored Ape community. We at 4RC actually own an ape, and we're grateful for the airdrop, but it feels like everything has grown so quickly. And I question whether we can deliver on all that utility. But when I was in Disney World, I'm like looking at all the things that people are willing to put money into for experiences, for memories, and so one example, and this is funny because it kind of goes back to the immutability of a blockchain. Many years ago, they used to sell these bricks when you walk into the Magic Kingdom in Disney World, and
Mm,
you could put like your family's name and like a little message on it. They
mm.
actually removed all of these bricks and like moved them somewhere else. People paid hundreds and thousands of dollars, and I'm guessing there were thousands of these bricks.
Wow.
Um, and my point is not like, well, if they did it on a blockchain, it would never be changed and it's immutable. But it's more
Mm,
about look what people are willing to do with their money because they're able to, when you give them the freedom to choose what they want to do, when they want to do with their money. And there's just an endless amount of other examples there. I don't sit around and speculate that NFTs are valuable because if my Disney World ticket were an NFT, I get to keep it forever in my wallet. But at the same time, why do we operate with why do we always look to have to trust these centralized entities that we pay money to for some sort of good or service, and then we have no freedom, let's say, to resell it or to give it away or just to do whatever we want with it because we already paid money for it. And I think like that utility is still really powerful. The fact
mhm.
that you can buy a digital good and you can resell it is what gives it value. There's
Yep.
so much criticism about like, why is that piece of art worth 10,000 or 100,000 or $69 million? It's because you're able to sell it to anyone on the planet. Like that's why it creates this humongous liquidity pool for us to be able to, to participate in. And, years from now, I have no doubt like, the NFT market is probably one of 1% of where it's going. Some of these might crash in value, but the staying power of like the utility that has been opened up, that genie's not going back in the bottle. I mean, we're just going to continue to see more and more people realize that it's nice to have the freedom to do what you want, whenever you want with money or goods or certain, digital services or access to digital experiences.
Mm.
And that's I think what we're building towards. It's really a freedom that we're building towards.
Oh yeah, oh yeah, and it's not just the freedom of like creating and owning and then transferring. It's also the freedom to innovate on top of that, right? You could think of like the Disney bricks where like, hey, look, sorry, we have to shut down this Disneyland, or oh, we have to repave the road, it's gone. But somebody else could recreate the Disneyland, fork it, so to speak, recognize all of these bricks that you've bought. Or I want to use if you have ever bought a brick on Disneyland, I'm going to give you the early pass to my new amusement park.
Exactly. Yeah.
Right? So it's the freedom to then like recognize and create value on top of that.
Absolutely. Yeah. Yeah. And there's, we haven't even touched upon it, but the composability that we've seen flourish in DeFi will also flourish with NFT based applications. And so we've seen all of these new finance applications grow from, a lesser subset of DeFi protocols. And we'll continue to see that combined with a hybrid of different NFT applications and protocols. And that's what, there's going to be parallels to the world we live in. There's going to, someone's going to release an NFT based ticketing application, which has already been built, I feel like, a million times over. But there's going to be those net new applications, which are really exciting. In the world of DeFi, I think Alchemix was exciting for me because it was just such a radical concept. Like, you take out a loan and it's actually going to pay it back over time, if you're willing to wait long enough. And like that's cool. That's where I think people get really excited. It's not just, what if we could do this thing that we already do? It actually, Uber to me has always been a great example. Like, it was just such a new innovation to be able to like call a private driver, not just like go get a taxi, but like basically have a private driver on demand whenever you want, wherever you want, to know that it's safe to use that. Like that sort of transformational change, that change is there in the Web3 community. The problem is that to be an early adopter still, there's just so much education that has to happen. And in many cases, the barrier for me has been that a lot of the language and concepts translated from finance are very misunderstood by a majority of the population. We just have a terrible sort of financial literacy across the world. And that will carry forward unless we make really intuitive applications, which I think we are. I think, like, if you can get past self-custody, or even if you use like a centralized wallet, I think you're going to continue to see competition amongst designers to enable you to do really intuitive things with NFTs or, different sort of DeFi applications. But Shi Khai, what anything else that's top of mind, from that 3 frontiers of Web3 in 2022 that you wanted to discuss?
Yeah, sure. We touched on the NFT part, and I kind of alluded to some of the DAO stuff where more people need to be able to earn crypto in a meaningful way, or participate in the economy rather than buy into it. The part that we haven't really dived much yet is around games, and I think you talked a bit about the metaverse, where like, oh yeah, we have these AR glasses or VR glasses, and sure, I think that is very likely, but how long is that going to take? Not too sure just yet. I think VR adoption is growing very rapidly, but it's far from mainstream just yet. But what is mainstream right now is mobile. This is very clear in every country in the world, right? Like mobile has taken over fintech, it's taken over videos, the latest craze of like mobile video with like TikTok and so on, and actually also games. Mobile games are by far the most popular, accounting for more than 50% of the market and growing the fastest out of all the segments. Everything else is either kind of like stagnant or growing very slowly or even shrinking in some cases, including browser games. And I can't for the heck of me understand why we are not building more mobile stuff, right? The Web2 guys have already figured out, hey guys, everybody has a mobile phone, let's build for mobile. We're kind of stuck in the browser age, which is fine. But like for things like games, a lot of it's still trying to go for like AAA, going for browser-based games. We need a lot more the accessibility that comes with mobile. So if anybody's building a mobile experience as a game, as a metaverse, personally, I'll be very excited to speak to any builders on that. And I think it'll be also just so much easier for me to use it, right? I want to be able to access the metaverse on the go, right? Or to play some games and access, just like how we can chat or watch a video or, do some crypto stuff on my mobile wallet on the fly.
Yeah. Every gaming developer that I've had a chance to speak with who's now building with NFTs and DeFi protocols, they all sort of just say the same thing, which is, I just don't see how we can go backwards once you learn about what's possible here. I can build a game, I can reward users or players. I can offer skin in the game to those who are like early adopters through NFTs or tokens. It feels so natural. It's not, we're not here to demonize the legacy gaming industry. I mean, like, I love playing games, and I'm like, I'll always have like a soft spot in my heart for like the likes of Nintendo. Like, I just feel like it defined my childhood and a part of my adulthood. But what's exciting now is it's just a new era. It's like resisting, a transition from a brick and mortar store to being able to sell online. It's going to create an alignment of incentives. And so that's one of the things. By the end of 2022, I am confident that like it'll no longer just be a conversation about, Axie. As much as I have all the respect in the world for what they've built and wish them continued success, but there's just so many games that are being built. And what's really cool is there's a focus on just building games that are cool and fun to play. There isn't this fixation on like, how do we hyper financialize video games and everything is play to earn. No, I've clearly seen that shift in like, I'm here to build a game that happens to be a better experience and benefit from, NFTs, tokens, whatever. And that's exciting. That pivot I was definitely looking for. And I think, that stems from lessons that have been learned through Axie, with all the growth they've had and all the sort of trailblazing they've done. We're able to sort of build off of, their success and again, some of their challenges and lessons learned. But Shi Khai, anything else there to add in terms of like the gaming element that we should be looking for in 2022?
Oh, yes, for sure. So like I mentioned, I think browser base is going to open up a lot more. And I think you touched on the fun element. We've seen probably hundreds of pitches of games already. Almost all of them say that like, we're going to be more fun than Axie. And is it too mean to say that maybe the bar is kind of low? But it's true, right? There's so much more room to go. And most of the games, they're saying that we're going to be free to play. We're going to have some sort of free to play element. So it's a lot more inclusive. Cool. So I think what we can expect to see is that the barriers to entry are going to be lower. It's going to be more fun. And hopefully it's going to be a lot more accessible in terms of devices as well. That opens up the target demographic to a lot more people. And to me, this is exciting, not because, well, I think everybody should be playing games for some strange reason, but because it's kind of a Trojan horse, as you have alluded to then get into Web3, for people to get a taste of like, what does it mean to own something? What does it mean to earn an asset and then be able to use that and then to actually trade it as proof that I've earned it, and then that gives me benefits in the future. I think great games are a great way to come in, especially if it's free to play and especially if it's fun, because it's kind of a low stakes way for you to immediately grasp these like digital concepts. You talk about owning a digital game asset, people immediately, oh yeah, of course I own assets. I have like in-game currency. Of course, nobody questions like, why are you trying to create a new currency? Like, yeah, it's like for a native economy that you're going to interact with like either the developers or other players, and like intuitively get it because there is an economy in there. So I think we're going to see a convergence between like what games look like and what a Web3 economy looks like, and it's going to meet somewhere in the middle where like Web3 is fun, Web3 is visual, Web3 is digital, and you kind of like live on there. It's going to be it's gonna look and feel like a game, right? Where all these metaverses are already doing, but with a real economy that's powering it, and and people actually are living and making a living off of it.
Absolutely. Yeah. Yeah. The games that are being developed, there's going to be elements that, translate very clearly from what we've enjoyed in the legacy gaming industry. But I think some are underestimating the stickiness of these future games being developed because of some of the financialization of the game. Like I've always like wondered if some of the early internet companies, if they had tokenized, would some of them still exist? Would Facebook have been able to ultimately beat out MySpace if there was like a strong community of token holders? And similarly with games, which have such a more viral and fun element to it, like there's so much loyalty to gaming brands where there isn't any sort of like skin in the game through an NFT or a token, but it's going to add an interesting element to it. And I think that's where I have all the respect in the world for like Axie Infinity. I mean, they were brave enough to build before others, and they found a lot of success. And there's really strong roots there. And again, I think people can demonize it all they want with like, is it because people are playing just for money, or people hold these assets and they're trying to protect their tokens and their NFTs, the value of them. But I think it just, in a way, again, it creates an alignment of thinking, and it does incentivize you to fall in line and to work together, versus just coordinating out of the goodness of your heart, because you love a game. Like there's something more at stake there with that financial incentive. But yeah, I mean, gosh, what a wild like last 6 to 12 months it's been, meeting these incredible gaming developers. Like we've met folks from, the likes of like an EA to, to Lucas Arts. That was definitely one of my nerd out moments, just to get to talk with someone about like having developed Star Wars games and like why they're so excited for what's available now through NFT based gaming. But Shi Khai, anything else that you'd like to share? We probably should wrap up here in the next few minutes, but anything else that's top of mind that you'd want to cover?
I think there's probably one last thing that we haven't really touched on with the metaverse bit. So I think it's a nice little segue, and also to tie it up with an overarching theme. We've talked about like having assets, and we talked about like gamifying the experiences, creating real economies, and in the end, I think I like to remind everyone that Web3 it's a collective creation, right? When we think about like the incumbent game developers, you're looking to a game publisher to give you this like polished experience, but that should not, or maybe won't be the case in Web3, whereby like I would argue that similar to how MySpace is, like you said, a strong community creates value for the product. Similarly, in Web3 and the metaverse, the strongest communities will create the most value with user generated content, be in terms of like spaces that we will stay in, or like the activities that you will host, the events and connections that you will have. So I'm looking to things like the Minecraft equivalent, or ways to then like gate kind of Minecraft servers that are self-hosted, for example, on Web3, or things which have a really strong modding community that we used to see on like a CS:GO or a Warcraft 3, or nowadays like things like Skyrim and so on are so much modded, right? And if we can bring that spirit to Web3, where there's an active creator community and active like player base or user base that engages with these creations, we are going to be a lot more resilient and prosperous, because there's new value being created. And I think to tie it all up as well, we've talked a lot about these like financialization and whether it's all right to like be capitalist and raise all this money, but it's, to me, it's okay. Like, it's great to create markets as long as we are creating new ways for value to be recognized. Right? We're creating new ways for people to earn, for people to sell your music, like sell your art, like sell your personality and your time and your social connections in whatever way that you want to contribute. And to me, that has always been the ethos of Web3. Right? It's not about financializing what you already have. It's about unlocking the value that maybe previously was not allowed to be unlocked or exploited, taken away by whatever platforms that you were creating it on. And so I think the frontier of Web3 and the key to creating a Web3 economy, now that all the rails and infrastructure is ready, is to unlock all these ways for you to then express and create and engage in a real economy in a digital space.
I love it. I love it. And you know what? Nothing to add there. I think we should just leave it at that. This is such a joy to get to talk with you. Like, I often try to like screen share and show off new DeFi applications, or, learn about like new NFT based projects and games. But it's nice to sort of return to, the fundamentals, the macro theses that, keep us all incentivized and excited to be a part of this space. I want to remind everyone too to follow Shi Khai here on Twitter, follow LongHash. You can also learn more about LongHash and obviously reach out to them if you're, building the next great Web3 project and looking for funding. And then also please reach out to us at fourthrevolution.capital. My team would love to work with you if you're also building the next great Web3 application, protocol, game, whatever it is. Shi Khai, anything else before we go?
Well, thank you so much again for having me here. And I think your content is great. I think we need both, like the very specific and concrete, like this is how you use something, this is what products like, and also at times to zoom out and look at the macro. This has been such a pleasure. And to emphasize again the call to action of, like, I hope everyone's energized by our conversation today, and we'd love to support you both at LongHash through myself, or DeFi Dad at Fourth Revolution Capital. So we're here to collectively create Web3 together, and love to support you on this journey. Hope you can reach out and hope to make more connections.
We'll have to do this soon. And by the way, we'll be in a green room here in a second. But yeah, everyone, thanks so much for joining us. You can subscribe at DeFiDad.com, and like I said, check out longhash.vc or fourthrevolution.capital. And thanks again here to Shi Khai for all of his time.
Can I plug just one last thing? Because we have our accelerator that's open now.
Yeah. Tell me about the accelerator. Yeah.
Yes. So we're recruiting for the Terra ecosystem. So if you're building it in Terra or on Terra, or contributing to the ecosystem in a meaningful way, say adopting UST, please check it out at longhash.vc. And we're also going to have our next cohort that's going to be announced very soon. So keep an eye out for that.
That's exciting. Yeah. I use quite a few applications on Terra, especially I've been using still use Anchor, AstroSwap, TerraSwap, and Mars Protocol too. I need to do a better job of keeping track of my 100 tabs open on my computer. But
yes.
Yeah, everyone, thanks for joining, and we'll see you next time. Thanks everyone. Bye.